Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, The Roadmap to AIOps. I'm Monica Brink, Director of Solutions Marketing here at BMC, and I'm focused on our Truesight AIOps portfolio, driving adoption and awareness of AIOps capabilities across our global customer base. My co-presenter on this morning's webinar is Seth Paskin. Seth, good morning.
Good morning, Monica. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing there in Austin, Texas?
Just like every day of the year, it's a beautiful day in Austin, Texas today.
Oh, brilliant. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and your role at BMC?
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity. Again, my name is Seth Paskin. I'm the Director for Technical Marketing here at BMC, also with Monica covering the AIOps portfolio. My responsibility and my team's responsibility is to bring the stories alive in our products that Monica tells to you folks, and to help take our customer stories and share them out to the rest of to customers and prospects.
Great. Hey, Seth, before we jump into all things AIOps roadmap, I'm sure a lot of our viewers right now are thinking about their upcoming summer vacation, or they've already taken it. So I want to ask you, what are your plans for summer? You got anything fun planned?
I do. This year is my wife's 50th birthday, and she politely requested that we go to Europe for her very first European vacation. So we will be, at the end of August, heading to Italy, and then on to close the trip a couple days in Paris. And I haven't been in a long time myself, certainly not for fun, so I'm very much looking forward to it. How about you?
Wow, that sounds wonderful. I have already taken my vacation, so it's in the past for me. I went to my native Australia, spent a couple of weeks there in the beautiful state of South Australia, which has wonderful wineries and beaches. So it was winter, but we still had a relaxing time, and yeah, it was very nice. So the summer vacation is in the past for me. So anyone out there from Italy who has some tips for Seth on his he and his wife's first vacation in Italy, feel free to ping him. That sounds great.
Yep. Would welcome any
feedback.
Now,
absolutely. All right, before we jump in, just a couple of things, a little bit of housekeeping. The viewers can pose questions in the Q&A window that you see there on your screen. We'll address those questions at the end of the webinar. There will also be polls throughout the webinar where we're asking you for opinions on your AIOps approach, any experience you have with developing an AIOps strategy. So please join in and respond to our polls, and then we'll be showing the results of these polls throughout the webinar as well. There's also a resource section there on your webinar screen where we have some additional content, white papers, other links that you can download that will help you with information related to the topic. So go ahead and make use of those. So with that, before we dive into the details of the roadmap, I wanted to cover some of the common starting challenges. And just looking there at that stat we have at the bottom of the slide, this comes from IDC's AI Global Adoption Trends and Strategies report from May of this year. And they identified that for 1 in 4 companies, half of all AI projects fail. So why is this happening? Why are these AI ops projects failing? So, for various reasons that were identified in the survey included cost of solutions, the lack of qualified staff, data issues was a big one, but unrealistic expectations was one of the top 2 reasons for failure identified in this report. And, why is this happening? What we've seen in the market, and was identified in this IDC survey as well, is that there is very broad and ambitious initiatives in place when IT ops teams are embarking on an AIOps strategy. We all know that IT is playing an increasingly important role in the business and in digital transformation initiatives. And as IT teams are trying to support that, they're facing many demands and pressures from line of business teams as well as customers. And that means that they're balancing a number of different objectives. So they need to support innovation. They need to support all these new applications and technologies. But at the same time, they need to maintain the performance and availability of services, and they need to keep costs in check. So there's a lot of different competing pressures on IT ops teams. And the other additional thing that contributes to the failure of some AIOps projects is for some of the reasons that they embarked on an AIOps strategy in the first place. There's lots of different systems to monitor, from cloud, often multiple cloud environments that IT ops teams need to keep track of. They're also managing on-prem environments as well as containers and many, many applications and devices. And the huge proliferation of data as well coming into the IT ops systems. You know, Gartner talks about the volume, variety, and velocity of data. You know, they point out that there's a 2 to 3-fold increase annually for IT ops teams, but you know, we're seeing even more than this with a number of industries in terms of the huge amounts of data. Now, the good news is this study does point out that 60% of respondents reported positive changes in their business models in association with their AI adoption. So there is certainly the promise of significant benefits from AIOps adoption. But a clear roadmap is needed, and that is really the focus of this webinar. So Seth, can you introduce us to the steps of the AIOps roadmap that we're going to cover?
Sure, thanks, Monica. So I think you really set the stage well. If I would emphasize a couple points from your previous slide, it's the sheer immense size of the task in front of IT operations teams that seems to create a daunting environment. You know, just massively broad, aggressive objectives, particularly in industries that are being disrupted, where there's a real sense of urgency, and then an inability to whittle those down and turn those broad initiatives, those broad set of aggressive goals into really achievable outcomes, and to set expectations about what can be achieved and what should be prioritized. So when you look at this slide here and we talk about a roadmap, what you should really think of this in terms of is it's a set of concrete steps to get from a broad view of very aggressive initiatives to a very concrete set of AIOps goals that you can then go tackle and implement. And that's really the focus for today, is to try to introduce you to the idea that you can think through your AIOps journey from this perspective and get from the broad and the vague to the very specific and achievable. So if looking at the roadmap in general, we want to start with definitions. So we're going to talk about aligning IT use cases and the IT business, if you will, with the overall business objectives. What are the priorities for the business at large, and how can IT drive concrete and specific business outcomes? Then once you talk about aligning those two things together, we can talk about taking a look at what good looks like, what success criteria we have, and then set our goals. And once you have very specific goals determined that are aligned to your business objectives, then you can take the position of looking at what are the systems of measure and where's the data set that supports those specific KPIs and IT use cases and goals that you've defined, and how are you going to lay the foundation for a successful AIOps adoption path that includes monitoring, tracking, and providing appropriate reporting and benchmarking, particularly financial benchmarking. So those are the first 4 steps of the journey, and the 4 that we're going to talk about today as far as laying a solid foundation for this for adopting AIOps into your enterprise. And then in a future webinar, we'll talk about some of the steps going forward, because once you've done these first 4, we can actually take a look at specific AIOps use cases, particular analytics approaches, tools, machine learning, and so forth, and that's what we're going to address in a future webinar. So focus for today is on those top 4 steps in the roadmap.
Oh yeah, and just a point there that for viewers that the link to sign up for that future webinar, we'll be covering the rest of those steps in the roadmap, is in your resources section on your screen.
Great, thank you, Monica. All right, so let's focus first on aligning IT use cases and KPIs to business objectives, because this is really the critical first step. And one of the frequent conversations that I have with customers when we're talking about trying to get value out of AIOps is we need to stop thinking about AIOps as a methodology for improving the IT metrics. We can't take an IT-centric inside-out approach to understanding what the value of AIOps is. First off, because part of the whole DNA of AIOps is bringing different parts of the IT organization together, but it's really about aligning IT to the business and driving business goals. So what you have to do is change the mindset around these are my operational metrics that I'm required to maintain in order to meet my SLAs, and instead say, what is it about what IT is delivering? What are the key metrics that I deliver that drive the most value or have the greatest impact to the business goals that the organization, the enterprise has overall? This could be in terms of reducing cost. It can be in terms of driving revenue. It can improving CSAT. There's any number of different goals depending on the industry that you're in. In general, though, of course, we'll see common themes as enterprises transform digitally and become almost software companies. You see a lot of usability and UX and customer experience metrics are very key. So IT typically plays a top of mind or a primary role in making sure that delivery of things like mobile applications or web applications, APIs, interfaces, those kinds of things. But it crosses the boundary. Obviously, it will depend on your particular business. And so the first step that you want to take in laying the foundation for your AIOps journey, the first step in the roadmap is to align your IT use cases with the business initiatives that are driving the most value or that have the highest priority in the organization. So this is almost a conceptual exercise. You want to take a look at, what are the business initiatives that are stated by your business partners, your executive teams, what have you, and then go and actually start mapping specific use cases. And I don't mean necessarily systems at this point. We're talking more about use cases, models. You can think in terms of applications and services if you want, but really it's more about thinking in terms of if the goal is to improve your customer experience by X% or to reduce the number of issues the customers experience by Y, then think about what the IT use case is, the customer story and journey with your technology is. Not it's this app or that app. It's more about what is the customer's use of that, what's the story around that. And so the first thing to do is to write those down on paper, get that stuff down on paper, and share it with your executive team. You want to get buy-off on your strategic AIOps initiatives. So when you connect them and say, look, we are going to go and have a direct impact on these use cases, these systems that drive customer experience, and we're going to drive positive impact to your business initiative. This is how you're going to get funding. This is how you're going to stay focused. And this ultimately is how you're going to demonstrate results. So the idea here is that you get executive alignment around and you get internal organizational support by aligning your AIOps initiatives with the business goals. Now, the key end result of this is that you want to make sure that you're ultimately going to get to the numerical measures, the KPIs that drive these use cases and that align to these business goals, because you do need a very concrete numerical measure that you're going to improve. So I'm going to just show you a few examples on this next slide. If I would say read through the top and just pick one. We're going to carry this theme through the next couple of sections, and we're going to keep talking about as we drill down to each one of these examples. So pick one that's relevant to you, either a CSAT or a cost or perhaps a performance SLA ownership, and then think through in your own organization, what are the use cases that immediately connect to and drive that business initiative, and then what are the key KPIs that are associated with those use cases. So I've been talking about CSAT, so I'll just stay with that one. Imagine that in this particular case, the key measure of CSAT has to do with the way that the customers are interacting with the mobile app. So I've gone through, I understand pretty well how my mobile app functions and all the touch points in the system that supports the services, the applications. And so I've identified some key KPIs that I believe at this point are going to be the ones that can move the needle. And maybe I have some evidence in the past. Maybe I've got some data that shows that in periods where our average load time for pages in the app or what have you, or response time reaches a certain period, a peak point in milliseconds, then I see a decline in both survey results that indicate CSAT, and maybe even if there's actions that the customers take in the app, we can correlate those things. So I have a hypothesis that this is a key metric. I know it moves the needle on my business. And maybe I've got, response that the app gets served across a wide variety of different geos, and there's wildly inconsistent performance in specific geos. And so I know that there's a direct correlation between the way customers in particular geos respond versus others. And that's another key indicator that I know is going to tell me whether I'm achieving my goals. So take a second and just think through this. If you've got a piece of paper handy, you could actually just start sketching this out. What is it that the business is telling you is important? What are the use cases in your organization, your IT organization that support those? And then for those use cases, what are the key KPIs that you know right now? And you may not know all of them, or you may not even know some of them. That's okay. But take a stab at it and make a list of what you think are the key drivers of your business. So Monica, I think we're going to do a poll.
Yeah, so that brings us to the first poll related to that first step of the roadmap that Seth just explained. So are your IT use cases and KPIs aligned to overall business initiatives? Really that first initial groundwork that you need to lay for a successful AIOps strategy. So I'm just going to pause here for a few seconds just to let you consider that and respond to the poll, and then we'll share the results. But, Seth, we've had a lot of interest in this webinar, and I think it is showing the traction of AIOps out in the market with customers. Based on our experience, a lot of customers have been researching this market trend and are now ready to really lay down the groundwork and do the important planning process that's needed to embark on a successful AIOps strategy.
No doubt. I haven't seen the latest, hype cycle from Gartner, but I've been in this industry for over 20 years now, and I've been working on AIOps with BMC for 3.5 years. And just even in those 3.5 years, it's seen a massive transformation of the market. And we've definitely gone from it's a buzzword to real interest to, okay, what can I actually do with this thing? To, all right, I know I have to do it, but how do I get my arms wrapped around it? Feels like that's all happened in just a short 1.5 or 2 years.
Yeah, and it's really a balance between making sure that they have the strategy and all the planning in place versus needing to get tangible benefits in a reasonable time frame.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look now at the results of this poll. All right, so interesting here. We have 23% that are strongly aligned between IT use cases and KPIs and with overall business initiatives, 68% loosely aligned, and around 10% not aligned. Would that have been in line with your expectations, Seth?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm encouraged that the not aligned is less than 10%. Because what that means is people are taking this seriously and thinking very carefully about this, and that they're not completely misaligned with their business goals. And to be loosely aligned as the majority, that absolutely makes sense. We talked about broad initiatives. We talked about massive amounts of data, tons of systems, complexity. It's really it of course is very difficult to get your arms wrapped around that. So it's pretty expected that maybe in some areas you have a strong sense, in other areas maybe not so much. So I kind of expected that middle bucket to be the largest one. So this kind of lines up with what I was expecting.
Yeah, and I think it also reflects that, IT ops teams have, over the last 5 years to a decade or so, becoming more strategic as their role has been elevated within IT and across the business. So I think that's reflected here as well, that there is that overall general recognition that to drive real change and real value in IT ops, you need to have a strong link to overall business objectives.
Great point. And for those of you who answer strongly aligned, kudos.
Absolutely. All right. So,
all right.
Yeah, moving on.
Okay. So having established a relationship between IT and the business, we now want to take the next step, which is let's think about what good looks like. Let's think about what we're trying to accomplish. Let's try to make a concrete assessment of what success is, and then we can start establishing goals that we can give to, so to speak, to our AIOps platform to help us go drive, right? Because we need to change from, we need to have a strong, tangible, measurable, concrete goal that we want to give the system to achieve. So I mentioned before that you might know what your KPIs are, and you might be just suspecting what your KPIs are. So whether you have a provisional set of KPIs or you have the ones that you know are really going to move the needle on your business, then what you want to do is define what success looks like for those KPIs. And as I mentioned, you may have some sense, like you may know, for example, that latency and response time is a huge impact, but you may not know what the magic number is that if you maintain an average latency of X, that will achieve the business goals that you're looking for if you go over threshold Y. So you might have to take a stab at it. You might know the answer, you might not, and that's fine. But you definitely want to at least get something down. Pick a target that you can go after, right? Because then you can see if you achieve it, and if it doesn't achieve the outcomes you want, you can course correct and fix and set a new goal. And I want to encourage, this is really the part of the process. I think, lining the business goals and the use cases, that's pretty much going to be dictated by the environment. But this is the step where you define success that really brings in your expertise, not just in IT ops or IT management, but really in the specific domain that you work in. So as you look at the KPIs for your initiatives, there may be some industry standards, right? There are industry standards around what looks good for CXI, right, for example, or there are industry standards for cart dropout on an online checkout, right? That there's a certain number of clicks and a certain amount of latency where you can see that there are definitely industry standards, right? So you can use that as a guideline if it makes sense for the KPIs that you're looking at. But really, most of the time, you're going to be looking at the context of your environment and your business goals, and it's going to require your domain knowledge. So this is really the critical point where you, as the auditor of the system, and we're going to talk a little bit about changing IT roles, maybe a little bit later today, but definitely in the next webinar as well, is that this is where your domain expertise comes to play. So the business is relying on you to define what success looks like, right? And so as you think through what the success looks like for those criteria, then I want you to think as you do that, that you also catalog whether for those particular KPIs, you have a robust and accurate measurement in place, right? So in other words, you may say, I know that this particular measure is really critical, but I don't get a good read on it, or we only get good readings in certain areas, or where the measurements are not frequent enough, where we get accurate measurements, but they're not frequent enough. So, as you think through, you're not going to be able to measure success if you can't measure that particular KPI. So think about those two things together. And I want you to think about it, not just in terms of establishing a baseline, because of course you have to know where you are to understand what success looks like. And then if you get to your success goal, understand whether you've changed. But it's also great if you can add at this point the financial impact. So this is something that we do, I'll just candidly, we do really, really well here at BMC. And I don't mind bragging on this company. I love it. I love working here. But our IT department, when they put an initiative in place, an AIOps initiative like this or any other kind of IT initiative for improvement, they always assign a dollar amount to their KPI in the beginning. They know how much it's costing them And so when they go and they make improvements, they understand what the financial impact is. So I encourage you at this point, where possible, if you understand, for example, you're trying to reduce the amount of time it takes for you to turn around an issue, or an outage costs you X, factor that into your calculation and measure that alongside of your KPI baseline numbers. And when you have all this in place, it's going to be a really easy step after that to set the AIOps goal, which we're going to talk about right now. So if we go back, I talked about carrying through the examples. So the first column is your CSAT, the second column is your cost, the third column is your performance and availability. So I'll just, again, stick with the CSAT example, but please feel free to check out any of the other ones or think through your own. So we talked about research saturation and load time as being, and our geo response, if you will, as being key KPIs for this hypothetical example. So given my knowledge of our systems, given my knowledge of our application, given my knowledge of our user base, I'm going out and I'm going to say that my success for me looks like this. If I can maintain saturation of my resources of less than 85%, or at least let's call it, peak saturation or average saturation, and if I can maintain a page load time of less than 2 milliseconds and never exceed 5, it's okay if I exceed 2, but as long as I never go over 5, then I have a pretty good sense that I'm going to have a strong measurable impact on my business. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, that I have good measures in place for all three of those things. Like I have I understand those things, I measure them well, I measure them frequently enough, and I know where the data sits. I know how to get those numbers out, and I know what it costs me, right? I know what a 4 millisecond page time costs me. It's a 60% degradation in the conversion rate on that app or in the usage rate on that app, so I know it's going to impact my customer experience numbers. So when I talk about a success and defining success, this is literally what I'm talking about, is not, hey, it would be great if, or, we need to get better at, but having specific goals associated with each one of the KPIs you've identified. And then, having done that, it's very easy to make the next step, which is to take you to the AIOps goals that you're going to actually catalog. And this is what is going to be the foundation for the actual analytics, machine learning, AIOps, the tools that you're going to implement in your AIOps platform. This is where the rubber hits the road. So as I'm keeping with that first example on the left-hand column, I've got specific goals, and then I know, okay, what do I have to do to keep my saturation under 85%? Well, I've certainly got scalability challenges, right? I've got things that I need to measure about, understand how the resources are used and manage those resources and manage scale out and scale in as appropriate, right? But that's what I can control, and that's what I can control and which I understand. What I don't know is, I don't know when the usage and the utilization from a user perspective, let's say, is going to peak. Or maybe I have a sense that what I really need the system to do is to tell me, based on promotions that we're running, based on patterns in the past, based on the calendar year, based on seasonality, based on trending that's been happening over the last 6 to 8 months, or maybe even last week. I want the system to predict for me when my saturation is going to exceed 85%. So I've said, okay, I have a measure that I call saturation. I have a success criteria that tells me that as long as I don't exceed 85%, I'm pretty sure that I'm going to have a positive impact on the business. I know that I can control on my side the utilization of those resources, so I'm not, for example, I'm not just going to over-provision to the extent that I never get saturated, but then my expenses are all out of control. I know the piece I can control. The piece I can't control is understanding when I'm predicting that, hey, I'm going to need to respond, or we're going to need to expand, or we're going to have a run on the app or usage that's going to peak, and I need help from my analytics and my machine learning to help solve that problem, right? That might be an example. So I now have a concrete goal. I want my AIOps system to predict saturation for me, because I know that if it goes over 85%, I'm going to be in a tough place. That's one example. Here's another example in that same, thinking about that same CSAT example, right? So I know I've got a sense. I want to maintain an average 2 millisecond latency on loads, my page loads, I don't want them to go over 5 milliseconds. But there are so many different touch points of what might be driving performance of the page loads. It could be the app, it could be the network, it could be the back end, it could be any number of things. We've got some third-party APIs that are plugged into the app to pull in other kinds of data. And I can't manually, certainly not in real time, but it may not even be possible for me manually to do it. So my goal coming out of this set of success criteria is I need my AIOps platform to be able to analyze at any given point all of the causal factors that drive a load time when it exceeds 2 milliseconds, and then be able to start measuring those and pick those out so that I can start doing root cause and eventually, obviously, taking steps to address and remediate those things. Ideally, right, once we identify those root causes, we could even translate those into KPIs that we begin to track and predict as well, right? So you start to see this cascading effect. So I'm hoping, I kind of went a little bit quickly there only because we're at the bottom of the hour. I hope the concept is clear that we're talking about a progression from the broad and vague to the very concrete and specific, but this last step of being able to get to saying, I now have an actual specific concrete achievable outcome that I want to give to my AIOps platform in order of support of my business goals. Now you can look at this and you now have actually 2 very concrete and specific bites of the elephant, if you will, that you can take. You're not trying to improve CSAT. What you're trying to do is predict saturation. You're not trying to improve CSAT. You're trying to do a probable cause analysis on why load time is greater than 2 milliseconds, right? So you've now mapped all the way down to the actionable level, the steps you want to take, and you've tied it to a measurable goal and a success criteria that you can now start implementing in your AIOps platform. And Monica, with that, I think we can go to another poll.
Yes, so our second poll is asking you the question of, have you established success criteria for your AIOps use cases? So there's 4 options there. Yes, for all of them. For some of them, not yet, or I'm still aligning use cases to business goals. So take a few moments to go ahead and consider that one and submit your answer. But, Seth, I think this is such an important step in the roadmap planning because, as we all know, and I'm sure, many of our viewers out there would agree, IT budgets are not going up. They haven't been for some time, and they're probably not going to anytime soon. So to get the buy-in, the organizational buy-in to deploy a successful AIOps strategy, there really needs to be quick, tangible business impact and value. And setting this success criteria up front really helps IT ops teams to establish that and to set the road for tangible value to be realized.
Absolutely. I think the other thing too about this, Monica, is that it's not just setting you up for success. It's making it so that it's making it feel achievable, right? So not feel achievable, but really making it achievable. But there's a sense in which when you're confronted by the vastness and the scale of all of the things that you're responsible for, it's hard to get started. It's hard to figure out where to get started and what to focus on, and that can be a real challenge. When you've decomposed, your big rocks, so to speak, into very, very small, concrete things, let's say you identify 10 different initiatives. Well, it sounds overwhelming, but maybe any one of those little 10 initiatives, AIOps initiatives, is itself, just one KPI that you want to address, one system that you need to set measurements up in and implement, machine learning. They can be very, very simple, and you can actually immediately, very, very quickly start realizing value. So once, it's all about getting that stuff straight in your mind and getting it down on paper, so to speak. And when you see it, you think, okay, yeah, you know what, I can do this.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's take a look at the results. Okay, so we're looking here, 0% have established success criteria for all of their AIOps use cases, 23% for some, not yet for 42%, and 35% I'm still aligning use cases to business goals. So I think, similar to the previous, the results of the first poll, we've got, we've probably got more that are in the category of not yet. They haven't actually embarked on this part of the AIOps roadmap planning process.
Yes.
And
and
then we've got more around still aligning use cases to business goals. So I think we can see here as we go along the roadmap that there is this is where people are starting, IT ops leaders are starting to think about their AIOps goals and priorities, and then get the planning process in line with that.
Yeah, I think this is also reflective, Monica, of we use the term in our industry a lot of maturity. And especially back in the old ITIL world, I'm sure everybody on the call is familiar with having that. It's, you're level 1, level 2, you're moving on all these levels of maturity. This is kind of reflective of that. There is definitely something, though, that I want to bring before and I should probably get the ball rolling a little bit so we can get out of here on time. But it's that I want people to understand that you're never so immature that you can't start the AIOps journey, specifically because of what I just mentioned, meaning when you can decompose your big objectives into very concrete and specific tasks like this, they're very achievable. And there may be things that you could do today with the existing tools that you have that you just don't realize. So, it's never too early to get started, and you're never too immature to be thinking about this. So I like the idea of not having kind of a monolithic process. The roadmap is really just a set of concrete steps to help people think through it and get there. But you don't. It's not ITIL. All right. So I'm going to try to get through. I'm going to try to move a little bit more quickly here, Monica, because I know we need to get people out the door, and I'm kind of loquacious. So the last point that ties back to what we just talked about, and then we move on, is once you know the KPIs that you want to drive, then you can start looking at the specific systems that you measure those KPIs with. You can start looking at the data that supports those systems, and you can start looking at where you're going to be tracking this and how you're going to be measuring what is going to become the system of record for your AIOps journey. So this is the point where you transition from domain knowledge that we use to establish the AIOps goals to talking about the data models that support the systems that measure that. And generally speaking, we're talking about in IT operations, you're talking about either performance metrics, which are just essentially time series data, usually along one kind of measurement axis. You might be talking about structured or semi-structured or unstructured data in the form of events and logs. Those are typically two of the, but of course there can be a lot of variation within those systems. So when you look at what you're measuring and what's impacting your KPIs, you look at the frequency that you collect the data, maybe the quality of the data. So this is a big one. We have a lot of customers that tell us, I don't feel like my data is good enough for me to be doing AIOps because it's not good enough to do analytics on, or it's garbage in, garbage out. I think that's probably overstated in most cases. There's definitely things that can be done about that, but it's something you certainly want to look at. Data accessibility. So this is really, I think, a key issue, because when I say accessibility, it's not just a function of can you get the data out of the system? It's also a function of does the data sit in your organization, or does it sit in another organization that you can't get access to? So, if you're collecting data that you need and it's in a production system that can't take the hit to be for a data extraction, or it needs to be done, in a batch process, off times, that's going to severely impact your ability to do the kind of analysis that you want to do. So you need to kind of just start doing an assessment of all those systems and just understand what the data is, and again, measure it. How frequently does it get collected? How frequently can you get it? Do you need it more frequently? Is the quality good? And are there regulatory things associated with it? You don't know if it's cloud data that sits in one region. Can you bring it into another region to do analysis on it, or extract it, or consume it into a tool that sits in another region? There are definitely complexities. Most people don't get that complex, but you want to think through that. And I would just want to highlight, I just yesterday or the day before saw an article online here. So IBM had done a survey about customers and their data science projects. And it's not AIOps specific, but AIOps is a form of doing AI and ML on IT. And they said 87% of data science projects never get to production. And the reason was that they couldn't get access to the data they needed. So it's a real problem. And I just wanted to highlight that this is kind of the next step after you've determined what it is you want to go attack in your AIOps progress, that you need to make sure that you do, that you can get the data. And if you can't, you want to start the process of making sure that you're able to access it. And then finally, and I'm going to hand this off, I'll hand off after this to Monica. This is, again, something, it's not super sexy, but success in this realm doesn't necessarily always start with sexy. You really want to, as you begin your AIOps journey like this, you don't want this to be sitting tribally on somebody's computer or in your notebook. Establish some place where you're tracking what the goals are, what the systems are, what the KPIs are, what the expected results are, right? And a process where all the impacted teams that are going to have to take steps, if you've got multiple operational teams that are going to have to participate, think about how that workflow is going to look. If you think that your KPI that you're trying to drive is going to require that a change process be kicked off, just for example, right, like that it has to do, and we know that, some ridiculous number, 70% of all the incidents in IT deal with changes. So let's just say you have a process around that, and that's going to be part of how you respond and how the implementation happens. Think about what that workflow looks like. Think about a place you're going to document it, and do that with an eye towards that at the ending, you're going to be able to automate a manual process at the end. So the idea is you're going to measure, you're going to use the analytics and the machine learning to improve. You may have to remediate manually at first, but you're going to want that remediation to be automatic and to be able to be machine driven at some point. So make sure that at the beginning you're thinking about how you can set the system up to support that. And then finally, going back to the very first slide, you're going to need to report out to your business partners. You're going to have to show success criteria. You're going to have to show financial success as well as measurable KPI success. So as you do that, think about from the very beginning, if you're tracking your measurements and if you're tracking your financial impact, think about having some kind of measuring or reporting capability set up so that as you move forward, you can actually share the success that you have, and you do it without having to, in a panic because it's a QBR time or your boss has asked for the update, that you suddenly are, grinding through a bunch of spreadsheets to put together a few PowerPoint slides. Try to think about systemically including all this stuff in the front end. All right, and with that, let's see, just to recap. So very, very simply, start with the business, tie it to IT, figure out what's important to IT that drives the business, define your success criteria, then set your goals off of that criteria, and then just start doing an assessment of your systems. And this is, of course, where partners like BMC can help you when you're at that stage 6. We can help you talk about that. And I think Monica is going to go through a little more detail around that.
Yeah, I wanted to dive into a customer example here, which really crystallizes everything that you've been focusing on regarding the different steps of the roadmap, Seth. And this is a major U.S. retail and corporate banking group who undertook around 18 months ago an AIOps initiative. And I wanted to present this to the viewers because it goes through that link between the business drivers or the challenges they were facing, and then the AIOps use cases that they put in place to address those, and then the KPIs that came out of that as they put in place their AIOps plan. So this bank was facing a lot of pressure from millennial customers. Actually, they were embarking on a consumer lending business. So millennials are really driving that increasing demand for 25/7 digital services. Always on, no availability issues would be ever accepted by the consumers. So they were needing to really ensure that they could improve staff efficiency as well as get a control over costs. They needed to ensure that their margins stayed high around this new offering. So I'm just going to actually read here because I think a number of our viewers will be able to relate to this, the specific challenges that they had as they embarked on this AIOps initiatives. They had limited enterprise visibility or data correlation between multiple teams. They didn't have enough detail being collected to help establish patterns to understand what was normal and what was abnormal. They found that their ITOps data was used just for troubleshooting rather than actual prevention. And then they found that it took far too long to identify and resolve issues, and that was directly impacting their customers. So in terms of the use cases that they undertook as part of their AIOps planning, they implemented increased visibility. So this came down to having a single pane of glass view of application, end user, and infrastructure with easy to navigate integrated workflows. So really driving that increased visibility across their complex environment. They also wanted customizable mobile-ready views on top of that as well. They wanted to, one of the other use cases was dynamic baselining and thresholding, and this really came back to being able to do proactive event detection based on identifying abnormal behavior. And then finally, they wanted to implement integrated root cause and log analytics. And that was to enable faster problem solving and eliminating, that war room situation that a lot of ITOps professionals face as they try to drill into the root cause of any particular issue across many different applications and a complex environment. So in terms of the KPIs that were established, there was that single pane of glass monitoring, and that came down to being able to increase staff efficiency and have resources more focused on revenue generating activities, growing the business, rather than, as I said, that war room situation. And that really was with the overall objective and KPI of lowering the cost of supporting business applications. Another KPI was around reducing event noise. And that was with the KPI of reducing the risk of outages and any performance degradation that would impact customers. And, I spoke about the importance of the millennial customer base to them, which had no acceptance of any downtime or slowdown in app performance. Another key KPI was extending mean time before failure and reducing mean time to repair. So that dynamic baselining and thresholding use case for AIOps really helped them to drive that KPI. And then the key one there was accelerating probable cause analysis and avoiding any downtime. So that really came back to their overall reputation, and the initial business driver of being able to increase customer retention, driving down downtime was identified as a key KPI that would help them achieve that customer objective. So just a high-level overview there of how that all came together in an AIOps strategy for one of our major customers. So it's, relating directly back, Seth, to that roadmap and just showing the importance of each of those key steps. So yes. Before we move on to our final poll and some Q&A, an overview of the Truesight AIOps approach. And in terms of taking this to market and helping our customers implementing an AIOps strategy, we focus on use cases because that's really how we believe our customers can achieve those AIOps goals and realize very tangible benefits across their IT organization. So the use cases that we support here across our Truesight AIOps portfolio include that important use case of event noise reduction. So many different events and alarms coming into ITOps teams every day. The importance of establishing pattern detection, being able to very quickly identify what's normal and what's abnormal, and be able to prioritize events based on that. Moving on from that is predictive alerting as well, and this comes back to avoiding downtime, as we just saw in that previous customer example. Being able to identify events ahead of time before they have any impact on services and then resolve those. Probable cause analysis and root cause analysis is a key one, with the objective and overall KPI of speeding mean time to repair and improving service levels. So being able to do correlation across many different monitoring data points, across infrastructure and application performance metrics, events, logs, et cetera, and establish baselines and then quickly identify anomalies based on that. There's also an important capacity use case for AIOps as well, being able to do intelligent capacity planning to both reduce cost and reduce risk of any capacity outages. So we've integrated machine learning and analytics into the capacity part of our portfolio as well, importantly across both on-prem and in the cloud. And then security operations. So all customers out there in every industry are facing increased security risks and increased compliance responsibilities. So using machine learning and analytics to identify vulnerabilities and then intelligently route that information and automatically patch vulnerabilities to reduce risk is key. And cloud operations as well. Everyone is going to the cloud. More and more customers are managing on-prem and cloud, multi-cloud in a holistic way, we know, without having silos across the IT environment. So implementing machine learning and automation to identify cost optimization opportunities across clouds and take automated actions on that, and identify any resource configurations, misconfigurations in public clouds, and deploy automated remediation to fix those as part of our cloud operations initiative. And then across all of that is automation. So, the value that you get from machine learning and analytics is realized when you can take automated action on that to remediate any issues, and then also have that closed loop link with the service desk around incident and change management. So that's part of the Truesight portfolio as well. And just quickly here, we did talk a lot in the roadmap about data and the importance of being able to get your hands around all of those different data sources. So, I've just talked about the different AIOps use cases. Truesight also helps customers with that data challenge as well. So being able to consolidate many different sources of data across different systems, devices, hardware, and applications, and having the availability of events, logs, and metrics. So really avoiding that need to have different data aggregators or many different monitoring tools, which causes that war room situation, and being able just to consume all the sources of data you need within one solution to achieve your AIOps objectives. So last poll here, and I hope that we have helped you somewhat in answering this question on this webinar. Hopefully you feel more confident that you did at the start, or at least have some of the information you need. But we would like overall, as you're working within your IT team and broadly across the business, how confident are you in building out your AIOps strategy? Very, somewhat, or not at all confident? And while everyone is responding to that poll, Seth, I'm going to go ahead, and we have a couple of questions come through. I'm going to go ahead and ask you the first question, which is around what advice do you have for building out my IT ops team to ensure success of an AIOps strategy? Are there additional skills I need to hire for?
Well, that's a great question. And I actually, if you go out on bmc.com, I wrote a blog post last year on this subject. So one thing that we don't believe at BMC, we believe that the tools should be the data scientist for you. So we don't believe that you should have to have data science level skill sets in your IT ops team. That being said, there is definitely a minimum competency with respect to understanding data, especially data as it relates to systems that measure IT operational metrics and events. And then also it would help for the IT operator of the future to have at least some basic familiarity with the way that statistical algorithms work on IT data. For example, understand how baselining is done, understand how pattern matching is done in log analytics, understanding correlation analysis, these kinds of things. You don't have to understand the math, but it helps to understand the concepts. And those are definitely two very different things, because I think that the way, in my mind, the way that the skills are going to evolve, as the systems take on more and more responsibility for measure, analyze, and respond, then instead of the IT operator being kind of a doer, they're going to become more of an auditor. They're going to be looking at the system. They're going to say, we have these goals. The system is now acting to achieve these goals for us. And, they're going to have to understand, well, if the system is not achieving the goals that they set out, okay, what do we need to do do we need additional data? Do we need to find ways to make tweaks to, the algorithms? Do we need to change the frequency with which we do it? Do we need to talk to somebody about, finding new ways to approach this problem? But they need to understand kind of how the system works to try to do what it does from an analytics and ML perspective, and then understand how that's impacting the business positively or negatively. So in my mind, I see them maintaining the domain expertise, but moving into more of a management auditor role.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense. All right. And the results of our poll, I think these are not surprising. 12% very confident, the majority 65% somewhat confident, and then 23% not at all confident. And this really maps to what analysts such as Gartner and Forrester and others are saying, that AIOps is in its nascency. So don't feel bad if you're in the 65% or the 23%, that most of the market is at this level, starting to realize that there is significant potential benefits there, and then starting to undertake the AIOps planning process. Okay, we have a few other questions here, Seth, but in terms of time, I think one of them was related to how can I match my business objectives to the required AIOps algorithms and solution requirements. And that's really a good segue into the next webinar. I know that we're planning to cover that in those remaining 4 or 5 steps in the AIOps roadmap on the next webinar. So there is a link in the resources section to sign up for that on August 22nd. And then we had quite a few other questions come through in the chat Q&A, which we will be sure to respond to after the webinar directly to those viewers. So with that, I would like to wrap it up. Thank you so much for attending. Seth, thanks so much for your insights on today's webinar.
Sure. No, thank you, Monica, for putting this together and to giving me the opportunity. Thanks to everybody for attending. And I would like to point out, I don't know if Monica put my contact info in the resources page, but I've been trying to type some answers to some folks also in the chat window, but we will make sure to get responses to everybody who asks questions. If you have, for any reason, you have any interest, any questions, conversations you want to have, please, by all means, look me up. You can contact me directly at Seth_Paskin at bmc.com. And I have published a bunch of stuff on our blog and some other places. So please, feel free to reach out if you have any questions or topics that you'd like to talk about related to analytics, AIOps, Truesight. Happy to engage with anybody.
Yeah, great point. There is some really detailed blogs out there on bmc.com/blogs on AIOps. So another good resource there. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. And as Seth said, feel free to reach out to both of us. You can also find us on LinkedIn. And thank you for the time, and good luck with your AIOps strategy and planning.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you.
IT operations teams face many challenges as they strive to optimize the performance and health of infrastructure and applications. The volume of operational data has exploded and is now beyond human scale to analyze and manage. New apps and technologies are being deployed faster than ever, and the IT landscape is increasingly hybrid and complex. As a result, downtime is increasing, service levels are dropping, mean time to repair is going up, and IT ops is unable to support business innovation. But there is a solution. BMC's Truesight solution leverages machine learning and advanced analytics to help IT ops predict, find, and fix issues across complex environments faster and run at the speed that digital business demands, all while ensuring high performance levels, reducing risk, and driving cost efficiencies. Truesight features comprehensive AIOps capabilities that include performance and usage monitoring that consolidates data, metrics, events, and logs from many different sources and applies context to help IT ops understand service impact. Machine learning of historical and real-time data to identify patterns, optimize resource usage and cost, establish dynamic baselines, and reduce event noise and false alarms. Powerful anomaly detection to predictively alert on potential issues before service impact. A patented probable cause analysis engine combined with log and event analytics to quickly troubleshoot performance issues and identify root cause. Automated operations to close the loop between IT ops and the service desk with workflows for event remediation, intelligent ticketing and routing, incident and change management. Reduce event noise by 90%. Lower mean time to repair by 75%. Diagnose root cause 60% faster. Reduce infrastructure costs by 30%. Contact BMC today to learn how we can help you deploy an effective AI ops strategy.